They accused Black Man of flying without a ticket, but he's the one funding the airline. In a world where first impressions conceal destinies, one man's quiet confidence ignited a firestorm at 35,000 feet. They claimed he was a stowaway, a fraud, a black man who dared to sit in first class without a proper ticket. Yet nobody knew the truth behind his immaculate suit and calm demeanor. The real shocker? He wasn't just another passenger. He was the secret investor propping up the very airline. Prejudice, power, and jaw-dropping revelations soar together in this dramatic tale of confrontation and redemption. Prepare to witness how mistaken assumptions can spiral out of control and how karma lands hard. Rain spattered against the tall glass windows of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, the busiest airport in the world, home to endless lines of passengers lugging suitcases of every shape and size. The swirl of travelers moved like a chaotic ballet, families with young children, corporate types in immaculate suits, college students in sweatpants, and tourists laden with souvenirs. Elijah Green observed it all with a serene curiosity. He stood in line to check in for his flight on Delta Airlines to San Francisco, flanked by business travelers and the hum of countless announcements crackling over the speakers. He wore a tailored navy blue suit, not for show, but out of a sense of pride in how far he had come. Beneath those sharp lapels, Elijah maintained a composed strength that had carried him through many storms. A slender woman with kind eyes stepped up behind the counter. "Welcome, sir. May I have your ID and ticket information, please?" Elijah offered a polite smile. "Yes, of course." He slid his passport across the counter. The ticket was already pulled up on his smartphone. He was used to traveling a lot internationally too, and he prided himself on always being prepared. The woman at the counter, her name tag reading Maria, gave a small nod as she typed in his information. "Heading to San Francisco, right?" "That's correct," Elijah said. "First class, flight DL942. Maria's eyes lit up. "Thank you, Mr. Green. Everything looks good." She printed his boarding pass and handed it to him. "Have a great flight." He thanked her and proceeded to the security line, humming softly. If only he had known that in the span of a few hours, one innocent flight would become an allegory of prejudice and comeuppance. But for now, ignorance was bliss, and Elijah had no reason to suspect any trouble on this routine business trip. As Elijah navigated the security checkpoint, a middle-aged man in a pilot's uniform seemed to give him a lingering stare. Elijah, attuned to such looks from years of traveling, arched an eyebrow. It was an odd moment, but nothing to spark alarm. He simply offered a polite nod, but the man looked away hurriedly. Next, a TSA agent called out. Elijah stepped forward, carefully placing his shoes, laptop, watch, and the contents of his pockets into the grey plastic bin. The conveyor belt hummed as it carried his belongings toward the X-ray machine. He moved through the body scanner without incident, retrieved his items, and continued down the corridor to the gates. Moments later, Elijah settled into a quiet corner of the Delta Sky Lounge, a perk of his frequent flyer status. He sipped some water, discreetly scanned his phone for urgent emails, and tried to relax. He was in no hurry to board. He wanted to let the initial crowds shuffle in, avoiding the chaos that was typical near the gate. The lounge was subdued in its chatter, a sanctuary from the commotion outside. Elijah would typically make small talk with others in the lounge if the vibe was right, but this morning he felt introspective. Various business calls awaited him in San Francisco, not to mention a personal meeting that could transform his entire future. Nobody in that lounge, or even on that flight, could guess the magnitude of what awaited him on the West Coast, a major negotiation to finalize his growing stake in the very airline he was flying with, Delta. But Elijah liked to keep his cards close. Very few people knew he was on the verge of becoming one of Delta's largest private investors, funneling capital through a consortium of financiers. With any luck, the final touches would be put in place within weeks, and the official announcement would break soon after. Elijah had maintained a low profile his entire life, but he was now on the cusp of stepping onto a global stage. Perhaps it was fate that today's flight would serve as a collision point of personal and professional drama, a place where anonymity and the prejudice of strangers would collide with his quiet power. He finished his water, gathered his briefcase, and exited the lounge. At gate A23, a cluster of travelers waited by the boarding area. The overhead display read, "Delta Flight DL9 142 to San Francisco, now boarding first class." Perfect timing, Elijah thought. Keeping an eye on the line, he paused to let a group of older passengers go ahead. No one paid him much attention, just another well-dressed black man in a busy airport, right? A flight attendant scanned Elijah's boarding pass. She gave him a fleeting, polite smile, but her eyes were a bit uncertain, as though she was silently double-checking something. The scanning machine beeped, and she handed his pass back. "Thank you, Mr. Green. Enjoy your flight." If only she knew, Elijah mused. If only she knew how big of a role he would soon play in the airline's future. Boarding the aircraft, Elijah greeted the flight attendants, politely nodding to each. He found his seat in first class, a plush window seat near the front. He tucked his briefcase in the overhead compartment and settled in, exhaling contentedly. Though he sensed a strange tension from one of the flight attendants, her gaze flicked to him more than once. He brushed it off. He had no reason to worry, or so he thought. Little did he know, the seeds of a confrontation were already being planted. As the first-class cabin began filling up, a few business executives in suits and ties took the surrounding seats. One of them, a tall man with slicked-back blonde hair, cast a cursory glance at Elijah and then snapped open his newspaper with a flourish. Another, a silver-haired gentleman with a quicksilver tongue, was chatting animatedly on his phone. Yes, once we land, I'll head straight to the office. Can't risk losing that account." Elijah offered them polite nods, though they paid him little mind. He was used to being invisible in certain circles and overexposed in others. Such was life. Meanwhile, at the front of the aircraft, the flight crew was deep in whispered conversation, huddled so close it looked conspiratorial. Flight attendant Lucy, who had years of experience, shot occasional glances toward Elijah's seat. Her brow was furrowed, her expression tense. Another crew member whispered something. Words like "he's in 2A, did he show a valid ticket? And I didn't see him scan properly," floated in hushed undertones. "Lucy, I think we should just verify," said one flight attendant. Angela, trying to keep her voice low. "We can't have a passenger sneaking into first class. The system must have glitched because it didn't show him as upgraded." A new voice interjected Heather, a senior flight attendant who had a stern manner. "Look, the passenger manifest is final. Everyone in first class is accounted for, right? This might be a misunderstanding." But Lucy shook her head. "I'm telling you, I scanned his boarding pass, and something about the beep seemed off. Maybe the machine was lagging. Let's check with the gate agent. We can't risk having a stowaway in first class, especially if he's not authorized." Heather sighed. "Let's just confirm quietly. No drama. The plane is still boarding and I don't want an incident." So Lucy marched up the jet bridge, determined to find Maria, the gate agent who had handled Elijah. Meanwhile, Elijah busied himself with a phone call to his attorney, quietly discussing the upcoming San Francisco negotiations. He let the conversation remain coded, referencing the investment without naming the airline. It was part of the confidentiality clause. Outside, the last of the passengers in first class were striding to their seats, and overhead bins were clicking shut. Maria was busy scanning boarding passes for economy passengers, and Lucy had to politely shuffle to catch her attention. "Maria, Do you remember the gentleman with the navy suit? The tall black man with a window seat in first class. Did you confirm his ticket? Maria frowned. Of course. He was fully checked in. Why? Lucy shrugged, feigning indifference. Just, flight safety protocols. We want to make sure everything's in order. He's absolutely legitimate, Maria said pointedly. No issues when I checked him in. She typed on her computer. Let me see. Mr. Elijah Green. Yes, first class, seat 2A fully confirmed. She looked up, voice growing tense. Is there a problem, Lucy? No problem, Lucy replied quickly, though something in her tone suggested otherwise. Just being cautious. It was the beginning of a brush fire fueled by suspicion. Lucy's suspicions might have rested, but as she returned to the cabin, she couldn't quite let it go. As she passed Elijah's seat, he looked up and gave her a small, polite smile. She, in turn, averted her gaze and clenched her jaw. Elijah didn't catch the hostility. He was still focused on his phone call, finishing up. Then Lucy swished past him again, and he felt a subtle friction, a bit of coldness, that made him pause. He checked if he had done something to offend her. Had he not said hello politely? Had he blocked the aisle inadvertently? But no, there was no reason for tension that he could see. Within minutes, the cabin door closed and the captain's voice crackled overhead. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Captain Rivers. Welcome aboard Delta Flight 942, bound for San Francisco. Our expected flying time is about 4 hours and 50 minutes. Elijah listened in mild interest. That name triggered a memory. Captain Rivers. He remembered a meeting in Dallas months ago about new flight routes. Could that be the same Captain Rivers who had been in the news for a turbulent emergency landing? The coincidence was interesting, but Elijah dismissed it as an idle thought. As the plane taxied away from the gate, Lucy continued to hover near Elijah's row. Each time a flight attendant walked by, he felt the hush of their conversation behind him. It was as though they were waiting for some conclusive piece of evidence that he didn't belong there. Eventually, the plane roared down the runway, and Elijah found himself lulled by the rumble of takeoff. Clouds whisked by the windows in cotton-like swirls as the aircraft climbed to cruising altitude. Elijah let himself relax, anticipating a restful flight. He had no idea that the next few hours would be anything but restful. Elijah was just about to open a newspaper. He loved reading print, old school style, when Lucy approached with a tight-lipped expression. She carried a passenger manifest on a tablet, tapping it with her polished fingernails as though it were a gavel. "Sir," she began, attempting composure, "could I see your boarding pass, please?" Elijah blinked, startled. "Sure." He fished out the printed pass from the breast pocket of his suit. "Is something the matter?" Lucy's eyes narrowed as she scanned it. "Well, we noticed a discrepancy. I just want to confirm this is legitimate." Another flight attendant, Angela, stood behind Lucy, arms folded as if to lend silent support. Elijah's brow knitted. "Discrepancy?" "I checked in with the gate agent and everything was fine." Lucy flipped the boarding pass around as though it might reveal invisible ink. "I just want to confirm with the seat map." She tapped a few buttons on her tablet. "Your name is Elijah Green?" "Yes," Elijah said, trying to remain calm despite the intrusion. "Is there a problem?" Lucy pursed her lips. "We're not seeing your name on our first-class update. It might be a last-minute upgrade that didn't sync." "Did you upgrade at the gate or online?" Elijah carefully shook his head. "I purchased a first-class ticket well in advance." He pointed to the details. "You can see that right here on the pass. I also have the confirmation email if you need it." Before Lucy could respond, the silver-haired man across the aisle took out an AirPods earpiece and raised an eyebrow. He didn't interject, but his curiosity was obvious. A couple of other first-class passengers paused their reading or conversation to see what was happening. Lucy, seemingly uncertain, shot a glance at Angela, who nodded as if to reinforce some unspoken suspicion. Finally, Lucy said, "Mr. Green, do you mind waiting here while we verify with the captain or with the ground staff? This might be a glitch in the system, but we have to follow protocol." Elijah's heart pounded. "I really don't understand. You're saying the airline system is not showing me as a legitimate passenger?" Lucy hesitated, but Angela filled the silence. "Look, we're not making accusations, but we've seen cases where people slip into first class without the proper documentation. We just need to confirm." The subtext in her tone made Elijah bristle. "People, as in, you mean you think I did that?" He placed a palm over his chest, trying to keep his voice even. "I scanned my ticket. The gate agent checked me in. What else do you need from me?" "I'm not accusing you of anything," Lucy insisted, but her demeanor suggested otherwise. "Let us just handle it from our end. In the meantime, you might want to step into the galley area so we can." "Hold on a second," Elijah interrupted, raising a hand firmly. "With all due respect, I have the valid boarding pass. I went through security and the gate properly, and the gate agent has my name. If you're telling me your internal manifest is incomplete, that's not my issue. I'm not going anywhere." Lucy's face hardened. "We can sort this out more privately." At that moment, the tall man with slicked back hair, seated a row behind, coughed and muttered under his breath, "Ridiculous," as though he found the whole scene annoying. The silver-haired gentleman peered over the top of his reading glasses, obviously intrigued, while a younger woman scrolled her phone, oblivious to the drama unfolding. Sensing that the tension was escalating, Lucy tried to muster politeness. "Let's all remain calm, Mr. Green. We simply need to check with the pilot or ground control. It's standard procedure." Elijah closed his eyes for a moment, inhaling deeply. He reminded himself that losing his temper would play into the worst kinds of stereotypes and possibly escalate the situation. But inside, frustration bubbled. Was he singled out because he was black and in first class? Or was it truly some system glitch? He'd faced subtle prejudice before, but rarely had it been this blatant. "It's fine," he said at last, reining in his anger. "I'll wait here in my seat until you confirm with the captain. But I'm not moving from a seat I rightfully paid for." Lucy gave a curt nod, turned on her heel, and strode off toward the cockpit. Angela lingered briefly, an expression of dubious suspicion etched on her face. Then she, too, walked away. Some of the other passengers exchanged glances, uncertain whether to intervene or mind their own business. Elijah felt his phone buzz. A text from his attorney, "Looking forward to seeing you. Big day ahead." He typed back a quick reply, resisting the urge to share the fiasco he was caught in. Part of him wanted to shout from the rooftops, "I'm not some random guy. I'm about to invest millions in this airline, for crying out loud," but he refrained. Pride and confidentiality kept him silent. He leaned back in his seat, trying to push down the anger. This wasn't the first time he'd been profiled for simply being in a place people didn't expect to see him. He was sure the truth would come out eventually. They'd check the records. Maria would confirm. Problem solved, right? But the seeds of conflict had been planted, and little did he know that the flight's chain of events would lead to far more than a quick verification. Karma was about to unfold in dramatic and unexpected ways. Minutes passed with agonizing slowness. Outside the window, a clear blue sky stretched over puffy white clouds. Elijah watched the sunlight glint off the plane's wing, ironically tranquil while tension simmered inside the cabin. The seatbelt sign was still illuminated, though the plane was at cruising altitude. Lucy returned, flanked by Heather. The seatbelt sign hadn't been turned off yet, but they made their way to Elijah's row. Lucy's expression was resolute, as if she were bracing for confrontation, Mr. Green, she said, her voice low but urgent, I've conferred with the captain and ground control. There seems to be no record of your ticket's payment on the airline's internal system. Elijah's eyebrows shot up. That's impossible, he stated firmly. I paid for this ticket weeks ago. It's on my Delta account. You can see my frequent flyer status. For heaven's sake. Heather held up a placating hand. Sir, we want to clarify this as discreetly as possible. The captain requested that you present any additional proof of your purchase. Sometimes booking websites can have glitches. Maybe you used a third-party aggregator. Elijah's calm began to fray. I booked directly through Delta's website. He unlocked his phone, pulling up the email receipt. Look, here it is, the e-ticket receipt confirmation code, all official. The gate agent said everything was fine. Heather frowned at the phone, scanning it. This looks legitimate, she murmured, then turned to Lucy. Could the glitch be on our end? Lucy's lips thinned. Could be, but the system says otherwise. Elijah pinched the bridge of his nose. Look, I'm telling you, there's no question. I have every bit of proof you need. If your system is messing up, that's not my problem. I'm just trying to get to San Francisco. His voice wavered between anger and exasperation. Heather said softly, Sir, please remain calm. We're not trying to cause you distress. At that moment, a beep sounded, and the seatbelt sign turned off. Passengers in economy began getting up to stretch or use the lavatory. The silver-haired man in first class took his chance to intervene. Excuse me, flight attendants, is this going to delay the rest of us? The gentleman has shown you proof, right? Lucy whipped her head around, giving him a forced smile. We'll do our best not to disturb anyone, sir. Elijah wanted to thank the silver-haired man for speaking up, but his mind was swirling. Why was the airline system failing? Could it be some technical glitch, or was it something else? He had a suspicion that the flight attendants simply didn't believe him because of the color of his skin. Lucy cleared her throat. Mr. Green, the captain asked that you speak with him in the galley area up front, just to verify your documents face to face. It'll be quick, I'm sure. Elijah glanced around. People in first class were definitely watching now, some with curiosity, others with annoyance. He swallowed his pride. Fine, he said, unbuckling and standing up. Let's settle this. He followed Lucy and Heather toward the cockpit area. Angela hovered nearby, arms crossed, as though anticipating trouble. The front galley was narrow and cramped. The door to the cockpit was closed, but Captain Rivers stood outside it, his pilot's hat in hand, a stern look on his face. Rivers was tall and lean, with a salt and pepper mustache. Mr. Green, he said, inclining his head, I'm sorry for the inconvenience, but we must confirm that everything is in order. This is a serious matter. Elijah took a deep breath. Captain Rivers, I have shown your flight attendants my boarding pass and e-ticket receipt. The gate agent confirmed it. I'm not sure what else I can do to prove I belong on this flight. Rivers narrowed his eyes. We're just following safety protocols, sir. If the system flags a discrepancy, it's our job to investigate. Elijah pressed a hand over his chest. I understand, but you have everything you need. Is the system still showing no record? Because I can show you my bank statement if needed. My phone has all relevant booking confirmations. Rivers glanced at Lucy, who shook her head imperceptibly. Let's see the statement, he said, extending a hand. Unbelievable, Elijah thought. This was humiliating. Slowly, he tapped on his banking app, pulling up the credit card charge from Delta. He turned the phone screen around so Rivers could see the timestamp and the amount. It was well over $1,000. First-class tickets were no cheap matter. Rivers studied the screen. Heather leaned in, as did Lucy. After a pause, Rivers exhaled and nodded. This certainly appears to confirm your purchase. He turned to Lucy. We might have an internal glitch. Lucy opened her mouth to object, but the pilot held up a hand. Enough. The passenger clearly has a valid seat. Let's not escalate further. In that moment, a wave of relief washed over Elijah. Finally, reason prevailed, but Lucy's frustration was palpable. She muttered something under her breath, something Elijah barely caught. "I still don't believe." She trailed off. Before Elijah could confront her, Captain Rivers cleared his throat. "Mr. Green, I apologize for this ordeal. If it's all right, we'll escort you back to your seat, and I'll personally check with the gate staff upon landing to figure out what went wrong with the system. I assure you, Delta doesn't take these matters lightly." Elijah mustered a tense smile. "Thank you, Captain. I appreciate that." He turned to Lucy, searching her face for any hint of regret. Her expression remained guarded, resentful. He sensed that even the captain's reassurance wouldn't dislodge her assumption. In her mind, something about him, maybe his skin color in first class, maybe his calm confidence had triggered suspicion, and she was not about to let it go. With that, the pilot gestured for Elijah to return to his seat. The tension in the narrow galley was stifling, but Elijah forced himself to walk with dignity. He passed Angela, who avoided eye contact, and re-entered the first-class cabin. Passengers looked up, and from their expressions, it was clear many had overheard bits and pieces. He sank into his seat with a long exhale, deciding to put in headphones and try to forget the drama. But as soon as he settled in, Lucy approached him again this time, her voice quieter, but laced with resentment. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience," she said, in a tone that suggested she was anything but. "We'll be serving refreshments soon. Just, we have to keep a vigilant eye out. I hope you understand." Elijah said nothing, nodding curtly. No point in engaging, yet inside he was fuming. "Do you treat all your first-class passengers with such suspicion, or just the black ones?" He wanted to ask. Instead, he clamped his mouth shut. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the music from his headphones wash over him. He was halfway to ignoring the rest of the cabin when he felt a persistent tap on his arm. He opened his eyes. The silver-haired passenger across the aisle was leaning toward him, concern evident. "You all right?" he asked in a quiet tone. That was unusual. Elijah forced a grin. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just a misunderstanding, apparently." The man nodded sympathetically. "The name's Peter. I saw your receipts. That's about as legit as it gets. I'm sorry you had to go through that nonsense." Elijah thanked him, politely ending the conversation. He appreciated the solidarity, but he also wanted some peace. Peter seemed to respect that and turned back to his own seat, leaving Elijah with a swirl of thoughts. Despite his frustration, Elijah tried to refocus on the bigger picture, the upcoming negotiations in San Francisco, his potential new role as a major investor in Delta. Irony indeed, he thought, crossing his arms. Here he was, the soon-to-be partial owner of the airline, being interrogated like a thief in their own backyard. If only Lucy knew, if only the captain knew. Then again, revealing it might complicate or violate certain confidentiality terms before the deal was final. He sighed, shutting his eyes again. Perhaps it was better to let karma play its course, because soon, oh so soon, the entire flight staff would come face to face with the consequences of their prejudice. And no one would see it coming. A quiet lull settled over Delta Flight 942 as it cruised toward San Francisco. Passengers either snoozed under blankets or flipped through their in-flight entertainment. Up in first class, Elijah Green tried to steady his thoughts, still reeling from Lucy's unfounded accusations. Across the aisle, business travelers tapped on laptops, oblivious to the tension beneath Elijah's cool exterior. That fragile calm shattered when frantic shouts erupted from the economy cabin. A man was gasping for air, his eyes rolling back. His panicked wife waved desperately at passing crew members, crying, "Help, please! He can't breathe." Lucy sprinted toward the commotion, her earlier suspicions about Elijah forgotten in the face of an emergency. Angela and Heather followed, dragging an oxygen tank and the automated external defibrillator AED. Passengers parted, forming a makeshift aisle as Lucy kneeled beside the man, who slumped forward in his seat. His complexion had turned greyish, and each breath rattled in his throat. Angela slipped an oxygen mask over his mouth, urging him to inhale. Meanwhile, Heather checked for a pulse. Her worried glance told Lucy everything she needed to know. They had to act immediately. "Captain, we have a serious medical situation," Lucy said into the interphone. "Possible cardiac event, request permission to administer AED." Captain Rivers's voice came back, taut with concern. "Proceed. We may need to divert. Keep me updated." Lucy powered on the AED, attaching sticky pads to the man's chest, while Angela counted compressions. "Stand clear," commanded the machine's automated voice. Lucy pressed the button, sending an electric jolt that made the man's body spasm. His wife sobbed, clutching her own chest in terror. After a second shock, the man finally gasped, drawing in a strained but precious breath. The relief was instantaneous. Nearby passengers exhaled in unison, some whispering thanks or clapping softly. Lucy spoke again to the captain, her voice trembling with adrenaline. "He's breathing, but unstable." "Understood," Captain Rivers replied. "We're diverting to Denver. Prepare for landing." As the aircraft descended, Lucy and her teammates kept the man propped upright, checking his blood pressure and assuring his wife they would be on the ground soon. In first class, Elijah felt the plane's abrupt change in direction. Glancing back, he saw Lucy hunched over the passenger, her demeanor fully focused and professional. For a moment, his own frustrations faded, a life hung in the balance, overshadowing their personal clash. Touching down in Denver, paramedics rushed in to take the man off. Applause and hushed relief filled the cabin. Lucy's tense face broke into a tired smile as she handed over medical notes to the emergency team. Once the stretcher vanished into the jet bridge, passengers were invited to disembark briefly. But in that lull, the unresolved friction between Lucy and Elijah still loomed, waiting for the flight's final leg to reignite it or lay it to rest once and for all. Emergency lights flashed on the tarmac when the aircraft landed in Denver. The paramedics rushed in the moment the door opened. The man, stabilized but still weak, was placed on a stretcher, his wife trailing behind in tears. Many passengers craned their necks, watching anxiously from their seats. Elijah stood politely, letting the medical team pass. In the commotion, Lucy and Heather were busy coordinating with ground staff, ensuring the smooth evacuation of the ill passenger. Angela stayed near the front, instructing everyone to remain seated until paramedics cleared the aisle. Once the stretcher disappeared into the jet bridge, Lucy announced that passengers could disembark if needed, though they might have to reboard soon to continue the flight. "We'll have a short layover while we restock emergency equipment and finalize paperwork," she explained over the PA. "Thank you for your patience." Despite the tension, Elijah felt relief that the man's life was spared. He checked his watch. He was now certain he'd miss his scheduled afternoon meeting in San Francisco, the one that was so critical to his investment negotiations. But he knew his lawyers would work on rescheduling or find a workaround. Life, after all, took priority. He considered stepping off the plane to stretch his legs. However, a part of him dreaded crossing paths with Lucy and the rest of the crew again. Maybe a break was precisely what he needed. Gathering his briefcase, he joined the line of passengers, making their way to the jet bridge. Lucy was at the door, quietly thanking each departing passenger. Her eyes landed on Elijah with the same aloof suspicion. She offered a terse nod. "We'll reboard in about an hour, Mr. Green." He forced a polite nod back, stepping onto the jet bridge. The Denver airport bustled with hurried travelers, and the overhead boards displayed a jumble of arrivals and departures. Elijah had no desire for airport food or wandering the terminals. Yet he yearned for fresh air, if such a thing existed in the climate-controlled labyrinth of an airport. He settled for a seat near the window in the waiting area, gazing out at the runway. His phone buzzed. A text from his business partner, Lionel, heard about the diversion. "You okay?" Elijah sighed, typing back. "Yes, medical emergency. Flights delayed, probably hours. Might miss the meeting. See if we can push it to tomorrow morning." Within seconds, Lionel replied, "Will do. The attorneys are flexible. Stay calm, stay calm." A loaded suggestion. Elijah couldn't help but reflect on the morning's events, the suspicion, the humiliation, the overshadowing reality that he was a major investor. Once the airline announced his stake, how would people like Lucy react? He almost took a grim satisfaction imagining her face. Yet the bigger part of him just wanted fairness and courtesy, not revenge. He stood and began pacing the terminal. Eventually, he spotted a coffee stand. The line was short, so he decided to grab a cup. While waiting, a gentle tap on his shoulder startled him. It was Peter, the silver-haired man from first class. "Hi," Peter said warmly. "I just wanted to check on you. You seemed pretty rattled earlier." Elijah offered a small smile. "I'm all right, thanks. Just trying to move on." Peter nodded. "That flight attendant, Lucy, she was something else. I'm sorry you had to go through that. I've been flying for decades, and I've never seen them treat anyone like that in first class." They were suspicious, to put it mildly. Elijah appreciated the sentiment but shrugged. "I've dealt with worse, believe it or not. Thanks for speaking up earlier." Peter patted Elijah's shoulder lightly. "We stand by each other, right? If it's any consolation, half the cabin saw what happened. It's not right." They chatted briefly about the medical emergency, relieved the man survived. Then Peter went on his way, leaving Elijah to wait for coffee. This small interaction soothed his frayed nerves a bit. Not everyone on this flight was against him. With coffee in hand, he returned to the gate. Over the next hour, mechanics rechecked the plane, restocked first aid supplies, and handled the required paperwork. Finally, an announcement crackled over the PAR. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will begin the reboarding process for Delta Flight 942. We apologize for the inconvenience and appreciate your understanding." Elijah joined the line, heading back into the jet bridge. He found his seat again, stored his briefcase overhead, and sat down, bracing himself for the final leg to San Francisco. He wondered if Lucy would continue with her frosty demeanor now that they had a partial resolution. She still looked tense, a forced smile plastered on her face while she scanned boarding passes at the aircraft door. Once the cabin filled and the doors closed, the pilot's voice came over the speaker. "Again, folks, sorry for the unexpected delay. We appreciate your patience. Flight time to San Francisco from Denver should be about 2 hours and 10 minutes. Elijah settled in, trying to push the earlier fiasco to the back of his mind. He gazed out the window, the Denver tarmac shimmering under midday sun. No matter how bumpy, this flight would end eventually. He leaned back, letting the hum of the engines lull him. 30 minutes after takeoff, the plane leveled off at cruising altitude. Lucy and Angela resumed service snack baskets, drinks, etc. This time, Lucy barely paused at Elijah's row. She offered a basket of packaged snacks with no words, just a pointed stare. He selected a small bag of chips, nodded his thanks, and she moved on. But as fate would have it, Lucy's day was about to get a lot more complicated. While she was handing out snacks in the economy cabin, a heated voice erupted from seat 20C flight attendant. "My bag is missing. Where is my bag?" Lucy rushed toward the flustered passenger, a young woman wearing a college hoodie. The overhead bins in economy were jammed tight, yet the woman insisted her bag, a small duffel with crucial medication inside, was gone. "Ma'am, calm down," Lucy said, slightly exasperated. "Are you sure you put it in this overhead bin?" "Yes, I'm certain," the woman replied, tears welling in her eyes. It has my medication. I need it. Please. Lucy scanned the overhead bin, rifling through other passengers' luggage. No sign of the missing duffel. Lucy sighed, turning to the cabin. Has anyone seen a small blue duffel bag in this area? Passengers shook their heads or shrugged. Anxiety spread. Lucy's own frustration was palpable. This is quite unusual, she muttered. Then a male passenger in seat 21B muttered loud enough for half the cabin to hear. Probably got stolen. This airline doesn't care about security. They let stowaways in first class. His gaze flicked pointedly up the aisle, as if referencing Elijah. Lucy stiffened, cheeks flushing. She shot him a disapproving look, but she also looked rattled by the mention of the earlier fiasco. The young woman's panic intensified. Please, my medication is important. If I don't get it, I could have a serious health issue. Lucy exhaled heavily. I'll talk to the other attendants. We'll search the cabin thoroughly. While Lucy stepped away to consult Angela and Heather, tension escalated. Passengers in row 20 and 21 started rummaging in overhead compartments. Voices overlapped in anxious chatter. Suddenly, from row 19, a different passenger, an older man with a weathered face, pulled down a small bag. Is this it? He asked. The young woman leaned over, looking hopeful, then deflated. No, that's not mine. Mine is bright blue. This is more like teal, the older man mumbled, frowning. Did the tag have your name? Yes, a name tag with Melissa H. on it. Lucy returned, panting slightly, with Angela in tow. We'll check the flight manifest to see if someone accidentally moved your bag. Could it have been gate-checked? The young woman shook her head vehemently. No, I took it on board myself. Please find it. It was a mini-crisis overshadowing the earlier tension. Lucy and Angela systematically opened overhead bins, scanning for the bag. 10 minutes passed with no success. The atmosphere grew thick with tension. Passengers started hurling blame at the airline, at each other, at incompetent staff. Even in first class, people could hear the commotion, muttering their own theories. At last, Lucy ventured into first class. Though she appeared reluctant, she checked the overhead compartments above seats 1A, 1B, 2A, and so on. When she reached Elijah's overhead bin, her posture stiffened. Elijah, who had half risen from his seat to stretch, looked on curiously. May I check your bin? Lucy asked, not meeting his eyes. Elijah nodded, stepping aside with a sigh. She rummaged through his briefcase, which was neatly zipped, and a couple of coats belonging to other passengers. No sign of the missing duffel. Lucy moved on, opening overhead compartments across the aisle. Then a sudden voice from behind startled them. That's my friend's bag. It was Melissa, the frantic passenger, pointing at a bright blue duffel wedged behind a garment bag in the overhead across from Elijah's row. That's it! Lucy's eyes widened. How did this end up here? She asked, glancing accusingly at Elijah. Elijah frowned. That's not my overhead compartment. I only have my briefcase in 2A. Undeterred, Lucy yanked down the bag. The name tag confirmed Melissa H. The young woman hurried forward, relief etched across her face. She grabbed the duffel, unzipped it, and pulled out an orange prescription bottle. Oh, thank God, she whispered, tears leaking down her cheeks. Thank you. Lucy turned to Elijah, as though about to say something snide, but Heather's voice came over the par, requesting Lucy in the galley. Lucy forced a tight smile and excused herself, leaving Melissa to hug her rescued bag. Elijah, perplexed, watched Lucy hurry away. A few of the passengers in first class exchanged perplexed looks too. The question on everyone's mind: how did that bag get misplaced here in first class's overhead? Peter, the silver-haired man, piped up in a half-whisper, It's crazy how they suspected you earlier, and now someone else's bag got moved around. Doesn't add up. Elijah shrugged, turning to glance at Melissa. "Are you okay now?" he asked gently. She nodded, still a bit shaky. "Yes, thank you. It's just scary to lose your medication." "I'm sorry if I caused a scene." Elijah offered a comforting smile. "No problem. Glad you found it." He then returned to his seat, a swirl of thoughts in his mind. The misplacement of the bag felt oddly suspicious, but he decided not to dwell on it, chalking it up to the chaotic environment. As the plane approached the west coast, the captain announced their descent into San Francisco. Dusk had begun settling, painting the sky with oranges and purples. Passengers around Elijah packed away laptops and personal items, preparing for landing. Lucy and Angela made one last pass through the cabin, collecting trash and ensuring seat backs were upright. Elijah exchanged a quick look with Lucy, but she avoided eye contact. He sighed, hoping that once they landed, the ordeal would end. Yet fate had one last twist in store. Right before touchdown, the seatbelt sign illuminated, and the cabin grew quiet in anticipation of landing. The plane's wheels screeched lightly as they connected with the runway, jolting everyone gently. A moment later, the flight slowed, rolling along the tarmac. A final announcement from Captain Rivers boomed overhead. "Welcome to San Francisco International Airport, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Delta Airlines, thank you for flying with us today. We apologize again for the unexpected diversion and delays." The sense of relief in the cabin was tangible. Elijah felt tension slide off his shoulders. He was late for his meeting, but at least the flight from hell was over. Or so he thought. When the plane taxied to the gate, Lucy unbuckled and moved to the front door. She mechanically thanked each passenger, her bright thank you voice at odds with her earlier behavior. Elijah considered breezing past without a word, but when it was finally his turn, he paused. A swirling mix of anger and pity made him want to say something. "Have a good day," Lucy said, stiffly, her eyes darting away. Elijah pressed his lips together, then quietly replied, "I hope your day goes better from here." That was all he said, walking past her into the jet bridge. A small act of grace, perhaps. He wasn't in the mood for a confrontation. Outside, the hustle of San Francisco's airport greeted him, passengers rushing to connections, families reuniting, and overhead announcements echoing. Elijah inhaled deeply. He texted Lionel about his arrival and told him he'd head straight to the hotel to regroup. But as soon as Elijah stepped into the main terminal, he was met by a surprise. Standing near the arrivals board was none other than Miriam Cole, the executive liaison from Delta with whom he'd been in negotiations. She was flanked by Lionel and two attorneys scanning the crowd. "Elijah." Lionel waved, relief flooding his features. Elijah raised an eyebrow. "I thought we'd meet at the hotel or your office." Miriam stepped forward, offering a handshake. "Mr. Green, we heard about the emergency diversion. We wanted to greet you personally. We have a small meeting room reserved upstairs if you're feeling up to it." Elijah's eyes flicked from Lionel to Miriam. "Even with the delay?" "Yes," Lionel said, beaming. "We managed to rearrange schedules. Miss Cole is eager to finalize the last details. You're not the only one who had a crazy day." Elijah nodded, scrubbing a hand across his tired eyes. "Give me a moment to freshen up, and I'll be ready." As they turned to walk away, a cluster of airline staff emerged from the same gate. Among them was Lucy, looking irritated as she finished a conversation with the gate agent. She paused, noticing the small group. Her gaze fell on Miriam Cole's Delta badge, then on Elijah, and her expression shifted from confusion to shock. Miriam Cole was a recognizable face within Delta. She appeared in internal communications and high-level corporate events. If Lucy had any familiarity with corporate leadership, she'd know that Miriam was not just a random employee, but a top-ranking executive. And standing beside her, chatting easily, was the very passenger Lucy had harassed throughout the flight. Lucy blinked, her posture stiffening. She took a tentative step forward as if to overhear. Lionel shot her a cursory glance, not recognizing her, but Elijah did. Their eyes locked. A flush climbed Lucy's cheeks. "Elijah," Miriam said, "we should head upstairs. Time is money." Elijah gave Lucy a faint nod, acknowledging her presence. Her eyes flicked from Elijah to Miriam's Delta badge, back to Elijah. A dawning realization seemed to cross her face. This man is important, possibly more important than she had ever imagined. She opened her mouth as if to call out, but no words came. Elijah turned away, following Lionel and Miriam toward the escalators. Lucy stood rooted in place, the weight of the day's events crashing down on her. The passenger she accused, belittled, and practically harassed was now in the company of top airline brass. She'd see soon enough how karma had a way of coming full circle. In a sleek, glass-walled conference room on an upper level of the terminal, Elijah settled into a plush chair. A variety of documents lay spread out before him, from shareholder agreements to non-disclosure forms. Lionel, Miriam, and the two attorneys were finalizing the last lines of the deal that would make Elijah Green a significant private investor in Delta Airlines. Miriam cleared her throat, pushing her hair behind her ear. "Mr. Green, we're honored to have you on board. Your investment is part of a larger private equity infusion that will strengthen Delta's global competitiveness. With this final signature, you'll officially hold a substantial stake with a seat on the advisory board." Elijah signed each document with a calm hand, though inside he felt a triumphant surge. It was the culmination of years of hard work, from his early days as a software entrepreneur to this new chapter as a major player in the airline industry. In the back of his mind, the memory of Lucy's suspicion flickered like an unwelcome gnat. He wondered how she might react if she knew the full truth. When the final signature was penned, Miriam offered a handshake and a grin. "Congratulations, Mr. Green. Welcome to the Delta family." Lionel chuckled, patting Elijah on the back. "You did it, man." Elijah exhaled, letting the weight of accomplishment settle in. "Feels surreal," he admitted. Miriam smiled. "We'll issue an official announcement in a few weeks, once the legalities are fully processed. Until then, we appreciate your discretion. We'll have an internal memo circulated among higher management soon, so flight crews might not know yet. But they will eventually." Elijah gave a knowing half smile. Flight crew indeed. He pictured Lucy's face and swallowed a bitter laugh. Perhaps the best lesson was to let her find out on her own. Telling her directly would be too petty, too on the nose. Sometimes karma was best served in silence. They wrapped up, exchanging pleasantries about the city and future strategies. Miriam left, hurrying to another meeting. The attorneys departed as well, leaving Lionel and Elijah alone in the conference room. Lionel turned to Elijah, arms crossed, an amused look on his face. "So you gonna mention that flight attendant to upper management? She basically profiled you. That's unacceptable." Elijah rubbed the back of his neck. "I'm not out for revenge. Mistakes happen. She might have had biases, sure, but I'm not sure I want to go nuclear on her. People lose their livelihoods that way." Lionel nodded thoughtfully. "Yeah, but you also have a moral responsibility. Racial profiling in first class? That's not a good look for Delta. If they knew, they'd want to address it." Elijah sighed. "True. Maybe I'll mention it discreetly to HR. I don't want to see her fired. I just want to make sure she learns a lesson. There needs to be accountability." Lionel patted him on the shoulder. "I get it. Let's go get some dinner. We both had a rough day." They headed out, descending the escalators. Elijah glanced at the gate area where Lucy had last been seen. She was nowhere in sight. If he had to guess, Lucy was probably finishing her shift, oblivious to the thunderclap that was about to roll across her professional sphere. A week passed. The swirl of media speculation around Delta's rumored private equity infusion intensified. Financial analysts discussed potential investors on morning news segments. Some guessed big-name venture capitalists. Few had Elijah Green on their radar. He had mostly stayed out of the limelight. Meanwhile, Lucy returned to her normal routine of flights. She had tried to forget the fiasco with Elijah, but a knot of anxiety lingered in her gut. She had glimpsed him with an important Delta executive, and it haunted her. Occasionally she woke from fitful sleep, wondering if she'd see a complaint letter or an HR notice in her inbox. Sure enough, her dread materialized one morning in her company email. Please report to the HR office in Terminal B at 2 p.m. The message was signed by a manager she barely recognized. Lucy's stomach flipped. At 2 p.m. sharp, Lucy entered the modest HR office. A stern-faced manager named Conrad greeted her, gesturing for her to sit. She perched stiffly on a chair. "What is this about?" she asked, trying to appear calm. Conrad folded his hands. "We received a report regarding an incident on flight 942 last week. A passenger, supported by other witnesses, stated that you unfairly profiled and harassed him. This passenger also had all the proper documentation for his seat, which you questioned multiple times." Lucy's face went pale. "It was a misunderstanding, I swear. The system didn't show him. And we had to follow protocol." Conrad cut her off. "We understand system glitches happen. But the passenger also alleged an undercurrent of racial bias, and other passengers corroborated that you treated him with unusual suspicion. I'm sure I don't need to remind you of our zero-tolerance policy on discrimination." Lucy's heart hammered in her chest. "I'm sorry if it came across that way, but I was just doing my job." Conrad tapped a pen on the desk. "We also discovered that after the situation was resolved, you continued to be hostile toward the passenger. This was not a one-off misunderstanding. There was repeated behavior." Lucy felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "I didn't mean to come across as hostile. I was under pressure that day," her voice quavered. Conrad slid a form across the desk. "We're issuing a formal reprimand. You're required to undergo sensitivity training and remain on probation for 6 months. One more serious complaint, and your employment could be terminated." Tears finally spilled down Lucy's cheeks. She hastily wiped them. "I understand," she whispered, signing the form. Then her voice trembled. "May I ask who reported me?" Conrad hesitated. "The passenger's name is Elijah Green." "But he's not just any passenger, Lucy." Her eyes lifted. She recalled that day in the airport, Elijah with the powerful Delta executive. Dread knotted her stomach. "He's an investor?" she guessed in a barely audible voice. Conrad grimaced. "He's part of a major private equity group that just finalized a substantial stake in Delta. He's effectively a new partner in the airline. This was flagged up the chain." Lucy swallowed a sob. The weight of her mistake pressed on her chest, making it hard to breathe. "I didn't know," she whispered, voice breaking. "He didn't tell me." Conrad's face softened marginally. "That's not the point, Lucy. Regardless of who he was, you should have treated him with the same courtesy you'd give anyone. Profiling is unacceptable. Now, let's discuss next steps for your probation." Lucy listened numbly, her thoughts swirling with regret and shame. In her mind, images of Elijah's calm, dignified face haunted her. She had jumped to conclusions, fueled by her own biases. Her prejudice had led her to humiliate a man who, ironically, was one of the airline's biggest backers. And now, karma had arrived, delivering its verdict. In the months that followed, Elijah's stake in Delta was announced publicly. The business world buzzed with the news of a relatively unknown entrepreneur stepping into the big leagues. Interviews lauded Elijah Green's vision, resilience, and philanthropic endeavors. No one outside the airline's inner circle knew about the fiasco on Flight 942 except the HR department, Lucy, and a few others who had witnessed the incident. Elijah continued his life quietly, Whenever asked in interviews about prejudice, he spoke measured words. We have to combat biases every day. It's about education, empathy, and accountability. Change isn't instant, but we must keep pushing. He never pressed for Lucy's termination. Instead, he requested that the airline invest more in diversity and sensitivity training. He believed in second chances, even for those who had wronged him. But Lucy carried the weight of that encounter, a daily reminder of how one moment of bias could unravel a career and how she was fortunate to still have an opportunity to learn and grow. Meanwhile, Elijah thrived, channeling his success into funding scholarships for underrepresented students, improving community resources, and quietly influencing policy at Delta to encourage inclusive practices. For him, the moral was clear: prejudice flies in small minds, not in big skies. And in the end, truth always finds a way to soar. We reach the end of this remarkable tale, a journey that soared from suspicion to vindication, from personal bias to corporate redemption. Elijah Green, once a quiet passenger doubted for his seat in first class, emerged as a key investor, pulling the very strings that keep the airline aloft. The twists and turns revealed how fleeting judgments can crumble in the face of undeniable truth. Hard karma found its mark, serving a profound reminder: treat everyone with dignity, for you never know who they might be or who they'll become. If you've been moved by this story of unexpected triumph over prejudice, don't forget to support our channel. Hit the like button, share this video with friends who could use a lesson in humility, and subscribe for more inspiring tales that showcase the power of justice and human resilience. Thanks for tuning in, and keep soaring.